So today we're going to continue our talk on internal family systems and what we call working with our emotional parts. And we're going to look today at getting our parts in balance. And this is part two of this discussion. You can go back and listen to part one if you'd like from last week. So one part that a lot of us have is what we might call anger. And anger often is found in the jaw tensing up, our fists perhaps tensing up. For some of us, our shoulders tensing up. So one of the ways that we can get our part in balance, or this part of anger in balance, is to ask, what does this part want to say, or what does this part want to do? Well, looking at this picture in front of us, it looks like, this part wants to do some damage, right? And so just asking, what does that part want to do or say? And perhaps maybe that's something you need to write down, or something you need to sort of do by yourself and not do or say anything to anyone at this moment when you're angry, but to sort of interview this part of yourself that's angry. Sometimes it's helpful just to think about, what does this part look like? Somebody thought about their anger and they drew this picture because this is what they felt their anger looked like, maybe to other people or to themselves. Some people think of a big fireball when they think about their anger, or they think about an explosion or a huge tornado of some sort that just leaves things, leaves destruction in its wake. But imagining the part is helpful so you can get some separation from the part. And the reason you want to get separation from the part is because you want to try to get to know this part better. It's really important that we get to know our parts in order to get them in balance. And so we ask God to search us and to try us, and to search our parts, to try our parts, to show us more about ourselves. And what we're really like on the inside. So one way that people have gotten to this is to consider that they can get this part of them to sit across the room. In other words, see if you can separate this part and get enough separation to get it across the room so that you can get to know it a little bit better. It sounds a little bit weird at first, but I think you'll find it helpful to be able to get some separation from our parts so that these parts don't have to overwhelm us. Now, how do you feel toward this angry part of yourself? Well, some people have told me I feel scared of the angry part. Why? Because the angry part's a little bit scary. For some of us, when we get angry, it can be scary. So now we've identified another part of yourself. Here is represented by this little kid with the blanket. He needs some comfort, right? And so here's now a scared part. So now we have two parts. And what's happening here is likely, for most of us, what happens is the angry part is covering for this part here, this scared part. Why? Because there was a time in this person's life when they were scared about something and they needed some kind of protection. And so anger came out, and or after an event of something where someone was scared and they were something bad happened to them, then later they got angry about it. And that angry part ever since has been covering for this part here. So now we got to go through the same process that we did with the angry part. We want to be present with, but separate from the scared part. We want to get the scared part to sit across the room for a moment. We want to try to find a safe place for this part that's scared. Some people think of their mother's arms when they were younger, or their grandmother's house. Or for some people like me, I think about the woods, and I think about a brook in the woods. Nothing can touch me there. Nothing bad can happen there. It's a place where I can go and I can be safe. Where can I take this scared part of myself? What safe place could I take it to? Come up with some imagery for this scared part of yourself. Now, also ask, how do you feel toward this scared part? I know it's kind of a weird question, but how do you feel? If you can separate yourself from this scared part, how do you feel toward it? Some people would say, I feel judgmental toward that part, or I feel hopefully compassionate toward that part. That's what we're after. We want to become compassionate to these parts, especially the vulnerable parts. How would you show compassion to a younger person that has a similar fear as this young man here who's scared? Can you extend that same compassion to yourself? Or the better question would be, how can you extend that same kind of compassion that you would extend to a young person who's fearful? How can you extend that same compassion to the part of yourself that is scared? The scripture tells us that God comforts us so that we can comfort others. If God comforts us so that we can comfort others, don't you think God would comfort us so that we can comfort the parts of ourselves that that become scared or feel vulnerable? God comforts us so we can use that comfort that he's given us to help ourselves and to help others. So use that comfort that God gives you to reach out to these parts of yourself that need that comfort. The scared part has some safety now. The scared part has some compassion. You've been able to give it some compassion. So now we can return to the angry part. And when we return to the angry part, we'll see in this picture that it doesn't appear so scary now. The first image kind of is faded to the background, and now we have another image. It looks similar in some ways, but it's a little bit safer. I'm not as scared of it now as I was the other guy. Here we can see it from what we would call the spirit-led self. That part of me that's led by the Spirit of God, I can start to see my anger through that lens instead of through the eyes of that young man with the blanket who's scared of this guy. I can see it from my spirit-led self. I can see it differently. So let's explore this part. Why is this part doing what it's doing? Why is anger doing what it's doing? What kind of job does anger think it has to do for us? Does this part of anger have a story that it needs to tell, that we need to hear? For these kind of protective parts of ourselves, we need to ask, what is it afraid will happen if it stops doing what it has been doing? So for some people, their angry part has been protecting them for a long time. And when I ask them, what are you afraid will happen if you stop doing what you're doing, anger? A lot of times people will say something to me like, well, I'll be taken advantage of if this guy doesn't do his job. Or the words that people say will start to stick to me, these words that I don't want to stick to me, words I don't want to touch me. And so we see here that anger is self-protective. It has a self-protective feature. It thinks if it doesn't do its job and it doesn't explode, then you're not going to be safe. Let me remind you that you're not a young person anymore. Unless you're a young person listening to this, you're not a young person anymore. Most of us are older than the version of ourselves that anger is trying to protect. We're not in the same situation that we were before. Maybe the situations are similar, but it's not the same situation. And one thing that we can do to help with anger or any emotion really is to remind ourselves that was then and this is now. Okay. I thought I needed to protect myself in that situation back then, but this is now. This is a different situation. I'm older now. I'm wiser now. I have the Spirit of God living inside of me. That was then. This is now. I need to separate these two things, even though they may feel similar to me. The angry parts that see our spirit-led self caring for our scared part will begin to relax, okay? And the idea is the angry part, when it sees that you're operating out of your spirit-led self and you're caring for that scared part, then the angry part can relax. Why? Because the angry part has been trying to do that protection. But now as the spirit-led self part of you begins to attend to that scared part of you, that means the angry part can begin to relax now. It can see that God is your defender, that God is your strong tower, that God is your refuge, and it can relax. Anger can now join your spirit-led self to help draw boundaries, to help maintain safety instead of exploding. So there's a transformation of anger here from the explosive type of anger to a more productive part of anger. And maybe you might want to draw a more flattering picture than the one we have in front of us, but that's up to you what kind of imagery you take with this. The thing is, sometimes we can't get in touch with our spirit-led self, right? Sometimes we're out to lunch on this, and we get angry. The thing is, sometimes this might be more passive, where God is going to come and going to rescue us despite ourselves. Sometimes we need to let God use a manager part of us to keep us from actions that we will regret. So here's a picture of a manager part of a person, self-control, holding back this angry part. And sometimes God will do that for us. He'll use a manager part of us, a part that's meticulous, a part that pays attention to details, a part that knows it doesn't want to get in trouble, and use that part of us to hold back our anger. We know the anger of man doesn't fulfill the righteousness of God. When we get angry and we're exploding, we're really not doing God's work. And so we need anger in this case to be transformed. We need it to get balanced out in our system. The scripture also tells us, don't let the sun go down while you're angry. And so our anger needs this transformation every single day that it emerges. And also the scripture says, be angry and sin not. So anger is a normal emotion. Anger is an emotion that we need to live in this world. But in our anger, we don't want to sin. And so we want this part to be balanced. If you'd like to join us live, we're doing these each week. You can go to meetup.com/checkyourcompass, or you can check out our videos as we upload them weekly on YouTube or Facebook. Acknowledgement, I want to let you know the ideas that I had from today. Some of them were drawn from a book by Tom and Lori Holmes, along with the illustrations that you saw were by Sharon Eckstein. Thanks for joining us. We hope you'll join us again.